If you're looking to buy your first investment property, you're actually standing at a massive fork in the road. Do you buy a house to live in first, or do you keep renting and instead buy a rental property straight away? Getting this wrong in 2026 doesn't just slow you down. It can quietly cost you tens of thousands of pounds and permanently remove options that you only get once. Now, this usually comes up for first-time buyers, but if you own your own home already and you're thinking of selling and moving, well, stick around, because the tax maths I'm about to show you actually works for anyone choosing between buying a home to live in or buying a rental. And I remember this position well. Back when my wife and we were looking to buy for the first time, I was actually the one pushing to invest first in a rental property and just keep renting our flat instead. And I was convinced that buying a rental was the smart money move, and then buying a home was just a liability. And you might have heard of this advice before, and some people call it rent vesting, where you rent where you live for the flexibility, but you own what you rent out for the income and capital growth. And it sounds clever, and on paper it definitely can work, but in the UK market right now in 2026, it's very often the wrong move when you're trying to start out. So today I'm going to be putting the home versus investment decision through the ringer, and not with hype, just with the actual numbers behind it, so you don't accidentally burn a one-time tax advantage on the wrong property. So let's first talk about purchasing power, because this is where the two strategies immediately split. If you try to get a buy-to-let mortgage as your first purchase, you're going to hit a wall. Most UK lenders really don't like lending to first-time landlords who don't already own their own home. In the worst case, they view it as a backdoor residential. So basically they're worried that the person is just telling them it's an investment, but they're actually planning to move in themselves. But on the best case scenario, they just see you as a risk because you don't have any property experience or landlord experience. So because of those risks, even if you can find a lender, they usually demand at least a 25% deposit. So if we take an average 150k beaten up property, you would need around £37,500 for a deposit plus all the costs. But if you were buying a residential property, and maybe it was your first one, you can often put down 5 to 10% as a deposit. You can get onto the ladder with far less money. So for that same 150k property, you might only need £7,500 to £15,000 as a deposit up front. But that's just the upfront cost. There is also the issue of affordability. On your own home, lenders usually cap you at maybe 4.5 to 5 times your salary. But on a buy-to-let, they stress test the rental income instead, and the rent has to cover 145% of the mortgage payment at a stressed interest rate too. So even if you personally earn a great salary, you might find you can borrow less on a buy-to-let simply because the rent on the 150k property doesn't pass the stress test. And that means you'll need more of a deposit to cover the shortfall from the mortgage amount from the lender. But even if you can jump that lending hurdle, you run straight into the dead money, as I call it, which is the stamp duty land tax. And it's where the 2026 rules really bite right now. As you might know, the stamp duty holiday ended last year. The relief threshold for first-time buyers dropped back down to £300,000. But crucially, the surcharge for investors went up to 5%. So let's say you buy a £300,000 property. The structure I'm just about to walk through still works with whatever number you have, but I'm using 300k here because it makes the tax point obvious. If you are a first-time buyer, you pay nothing for stamp duty. And even if you aren't, so maybe you're a home mover moving your primary residence, you just pay the standard rate, which is roughly £5,000. But on the other hand, if you're an investor, you pay the standard rate, which is the £5,000, plus the 5% surcharge, which is £15,000, which means a total stamp duty land tax of £20,000 just to purchase the property. And again, that's dead money in my opinion, because it goes straight to the government and you own no equity of that property because of it. So look at that difference. If you buy it as a home, you pay nothing, or 5k, and if you buy it as a rental, you pay £20,000. That's £15,000 to £20,000 of your hard-earned cash that just disappears to HMRC. And it gets worse. Once you buy that rental, you are no longer a first-time buyer for the future. You have burned your golden ticket on an investment property. Mathematically, you always want to use your tax-free allowance on the most expensive asset that you will buy, and usually that's your home, not your starter investment. But then there is the leverage. Wealth in property is ultimately built on good debt and capital growth over the long term. Let's assume the UK market grows about 4% year on year on average. Historically, it has roughly been 4% for the past 20 years or so. It has fluctuated pretty wildly over the past few years, but in general, long term, it still is about 4%. So talking about the scenario A of what we can afford from the deposit and maybe from the affordability, let's say for your home, you can afford up to a 300k house, whereas for the extra fees and the potential affordability based on the rent, you can only afford 150k for your investment. So you've bought a 300k house with maybe a 10% deposit, which is 30k, and with 4% growth on 300k, it gives you a £12,000 gain in year one. And over time, this growth is compounding. So you'd see it go up and up and up. Brilliant. But for the scenario B, which is an investment where you could only afford a property worth 150k because a 25% deposit would be approximately 37k alone, your compounding growth may be flatter than if you borrowed more with higher leverage, because 1 year at 4% growth on 150k is only £6,000 a year. So over 1 year, this would give you 12k, and over 1 year, this would only give you 6k. So despite the deposits being roughly the same amount, or even more expensive on the investment, because you've used higher leverage on your own home, your return on cash is significantly higher, double in this case. And the kicker of it is that 12k gain on your own personal property is also free from capital gains tax because it was your primary residence. If you were to sell it, that gain is actually taxable at the current higher rates, so 18 or 24%. Now, I wouldn't be doing you guys justice if I mentioned that leverage is a double-edged sword. Borrowing more on leverage means that if house prices fall, then you will lose more for the more leverage that you are. It is an additional risk, but historically and long term, we've seen house prices go up, and your loss is only realized once you actually sell the property. So even when some of my properties have had capital shrinkage and lost money over a year because of the market, I've held onto them until the market grew again. Remember, the loss is only realized once you actually sell. So a couple of my viewers commented on one of my previous videos and actually asked for this video. Should I live in it or not? And my answer is live in a property, but monetize it as much as you can. If you want to be an investor, but need to buy a home, you should take advantage of not only the first-time buyer relief, but the government rent-a-room scheme as well. You can buy a 2 or more bedroom property as your primary residence, and you get the residential mortgage rate and live in it yourself. You get the stamp duty relief from the first-time buyer, or pay the standard low rate, and then you get a lodger through the scheme. You can earn up to £7,500 a year tax-free from a lodger, and that would be £625 a month. In many parts of the UK, £625 covers more than half of your interest payments. Now, I've never had a lodger myself, but I have been one. I remember living in a tiny house with a mate, and the kitchen was like a small corner one. And if the dishwasher was open, you literally couldn't open the washing machine door at the same time. So my point here is that it's not always easy, and you are sharing your space. But if you are serious about building a portfolio from zero, having that landlord experience will save money on investor mortgage products later. So not only are you earning money through the rent, you're also saving money later too. So if I was starting again in property, let's say with £30,000, and assuming I'm lucky enough to have a job that puts me in or near the higher tax bracket, this is the exact timeline that I'd follow. And again, if you're not a first-time buyer, this timeline is exactly the same. You just need to budget an extra 5 or so K for the stamp duty that I'm going to say in step 1. So to start with, in year 0, I would buy a fixer-upper house to live in. I would use the first-time buyer stamp duty relief to maximum effect and not have to pay any stamp duty. And I'd put down a 5% deposit if I can. So that would be a £15,000 deposit on a residential mortgage. And then on top of that, I'd expect maybe 2K of fees like solicitors and surveys. So that means straight away, I've spent maybe £17,000 on my 30K budget, but I've now got a property that needs some work doing to it. And between when I got the keys and my second year of owning that property, I'd renovate it with my remaining £13,000 and do as much DIY as possible to gain some experience with trades. And also, I would get a lodger if I can. Hopefully renting it out to them for £625 a month for their room, and I'd use that 7.5k annual tax-free income to rebuild my savings pot too. Now, by the second year, the property has hopefully gone up in value from both the refurb and from 2 years of capital growth. So realistically, let's say 25% to 375k. And I also have £15,000 of savings thanks to my lodger. And it's at this point, year 2, that you have to make the big decision. You now have a higher value property worth 25% more, which means that you've got 90k of equity in. You've got a couple of years of tax-free lodger income, and you've got landlord experience, and you know how to refurb and have some hands-on experience too. And you can decide one of 3 options. The first option I call the flip. You sell the house that you've invested into, and because it's your main home, you pay 0 in capital gains tax. You take all of the profit, which is 60k in this case, and you move into a bigger home with your 90k of equity, the 60k profit and your 30k of initial starting funds. It's a pretty simple and straightforward option, and you're just rolling the dice again on another renovation. And you're basically just flipping flipping properties going forward. But option 2 is the buy to let. For the buy to let, you move out of the house you just renovated and move into a new home for yourself. And you remortgage this property, you still own it, and you remortgage onto an investment loan. Unfortunately for this option, you will have to leave 25% worth of equity in the deal as the deposit, but you keep the asset. And if it's worth 375k right now, that means that you need to leave in around 94k as that 25% deposit. So if you have saved the 15k over 2 years, then you can add in that additional 4k yourself on top of the equity you've already built. So that means that you'd have a rental property, you'd have 11k left over, and you need to buy or rent another house to live in. So as you can see, this option 2 is quite expensive. And then we have option 3, the BRR, not the BRRR, which I usually do, because you've bought the property, you refurbished it, and then you refinance it, but you stay living there, and that's the most important part. This option 3 is my favorite route. You keep the house that you've renovated yourself to your own likes and standards. You get to keep your low rate because it's a residential property, and you get all the experience, but you release the cash to start your portfolio properly through a dedicated financial vehicle, a limited company, to maximize tax efficiency. Because once you're a higher taxpayer, thanks to Section 24, it means that you can no longer offset all of the mortgage costs and deduct them from the profit. So let's reel it all the way back to the original question of should you live in your first investment property or not. If you're a first-time buyer in 2026 or even just restarting your property journey, secure your own roof first. The tax breaks and leverage on your own home are just too good to ignore. You build the base, you fill the spare room if you need cash, and you renovate it yourself, and then you look at investment properties once you're established. If you want to chat through your specific situation, I've actually just opened up some more one-to-one consulting bundles on my website. The link is in the description if you want a second pair of eyes on your plan. And if you'd like an in-depth video of me finding a real property with potential, check out the video that I'll have floating over here somewhere. It's actually a 40-minute video of me using Rightmove and other tools to search for a property that I would probably invest in myself. Thank you for watching, I hope this helped, and please like and subscribe if it did, and I'll catch you in the next one.